week. I think this is the 20-somethingth time I've been on this floor just during this year. Every week the Senate is in session. I come and do the waste of the week. This week it addresses, as I said, the Department of Defense, and I want to highlight what a recent Inspector General of the Department of Defense report found: over $40 million of overspending by the Department of Defense to build one gas station in Afghanistan. That's right, over $40 million to build one gas station in Afghanistan. The Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction found that the Department of Defense Task Force for Stability and Business Operations spent actually $43 million on a single natural gas fueling station in Afghanistan. The station was originally projected to cost $3 million. And we'll talk about how did it ever get to $3 million, let alone how in the world could this have gotten to a total of $43 million. According to the IG report, the DoD spent this money, and I quote, to fund the construction and to supervise the initial operation of the station. Specifically, it spent approximately $12.3 million in direct costs, I guess that's building the station, and $30 million in overhead costs. We're digging in to find out what those overhead costs were, but somebody came away with a pretty good profit margin just by submitting bills for $30 million in overhead costs, which apparently was approved and spent and given to the contractors. Now, to make matters worse, the Inspector General's office found that the reasons for why the gas station needed to be built in the first place were not legitimate. They said there's zero evidence that the Department of Defense conducted the prior research necessary to identify potential obstacles before initiating this $43 million project. Wouldn't you think somebody would have said, now wait a minute, what is this for? Where's it going to be? How much is it going to cost? Is it worth, what's the projected spending? And is it going to be worth doing this? And does it make any sense? The IG office said zero evidence in the DoD's research that could be a potential obstacle to going forward with this. One of those obstacles is the fact that Afghanistan doesn't have the pipeline infrastructure to get the gas to the gas station. Another key obstacle is that on average it would cost more to convert a vehicle in Afghanistan to use compressed natural gas than the average Afghan earns in a single year. So what all this means is that the Department of Defense built a gas station that doesn't consistently have gas or customers, all for $43 million. And most outrageously, the original $3 million allocated to this project, even that was over and above the international norm for building this kind of gas station, natural gas. The International Energy Agency analyzed global construction costs for similar fueling stations and found that construction costs ranged from $200,000 to $500,000 per station. It did acknowledge that in the non-industrialized countries, such as Afghanistan, costs would be on the high end. Okay, the high end here is $500,000. It still raises the question of, if nobody's going to use it, or we can't get gas to the station to put into the vehicles, why are we doing this in the first place? But it also raises the point that why did it cost $3 million in construction costs projected when the average high end is $500,000 per station in places like Afghanistan? $3 million? What do you get for $3 million? What they say you got for $3 million, ending up costing $12 million and a final bill of $43 million, what do you get? Here's what you get. You get one of these out in the desert In Afghanistan, it's a little bit blurry. There's the structure. You got some pumps here. They actually did want to prove that some cars use this, so there's a couple of vehicles here. Out there is the desert. There's a telephone pole, I guess, or that's a power line out there. You can see we're not talking about the middle of the city here. So that's what you get. That's what you get, folks, for $43 million of expenditure. Now, this is almost beyond the pale. It's almost something that you come down here and say, this can't be true. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is an example, though, I'm afraid, of a lot of other overspending, which we're going to dive into. But this one example alone illustrates that someone is making some very, very bad decisions, and that taxpayers' dollars were, to say, not the least, at the least, properly stewarded by someone. American taxpayers deserve an answer to this fraud, to this waste. Why did we pay $43 million to build this gas station when there was no research justifying building it in the first place? They want an explanation of why this particular project was $40 million over budget. And even the budgeted price was significantly higher, by 8 to 10 times higher than the projected average cost of building something like this in a third world country. Taxpayers need an explanation of how and why this could have ever happened. And there needs to be a full investigation, and we need and will demand answers. What I've illustrated here is a perfect example of why not only my constituents, but the American public feels like Washington can no longer be trusted, and that no one in Washington gets it. Well, I get it, and we ought to be all getting it. And we ought to be just as outraged as our constituents in terms of our performance here. This is totally unacceptable. And as I said, I'm one of the biggest supporters of a strong national defense that stands on this Senate floor. But we are weakening our defense and not allocating money to the essentials that we need to support our soldiers in the essential tasks that they have with the equipment that they need. And we're doing this kind of stuff, and it's got to stop. So here we are in my 20-something waste of the week, now totaling already over $117 billion. That's not million, over $117 billion of identified waste. And who knows what the total would be if we could comb through every agency. Our former colleague Tom Coburn used to come down here and said there's a good $1 trillion if you add it all up. I don't know if it reaches that high or not, but boy, we're on the way. We're well over $117 trillion, and these are just some of the things I've identified here during this year coming to the floor to address this. I hope my colleagues will pay attention to this. I hope we can identify, we can't get the big thing done. The president won't sign anything, won't engage in anything relative to the real gorilla in the room here, the real thing that's going to take us down economically, and that is the runaway entitlements. But despite all the efforts, many of which were bipartisan, despite those efforts, the president has said no, 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 not on my watch. And so the spending just keeps going up. But the least thing we can do until we get somebody more responsible as our leader in the White House, and we have the will here and the courage here to take on what we all know we need to do to get our fiscal house back in order. In the meantime, we can at least stop this egregious spending and waste of taxpayers' dollars through fraud and abuse. And I'm going to continue to do this, and so I'll be back next week. We've got them lined up in our office. I could come down here virtually every day and do this and not run out of examples of how taxpayers' dollars are being wasted. As you can tell, I'm getting worked up about all this, and somebody needs to get worked up about this because it's not happening, and we're spending money, and the public has given up and thrown up their hands and said you're dysfunctional, and they're right. With that, Madam Chairman, Madam President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of the floor.